If you hear your name whispered in the dark, don't turn around. It's not someone calling for you. It's something. That's what my sister told me before she disappeared. I didn't believe her at first. Hell, I laughed when she said it. But now I wish I'd taken her seriously. My name is Jake, and this isn't some made-up story or urban legend. This happened to me, to us, and if I hadn't survived, no one would ever know about it. My younger sister, Emily, was always the imaginative one. She loved ghost stories, horror movies, anything that gave her goosebumps. Me, I thought all of it was nonsense, until the day everything changed. It started innocently enough. We lived in an old house on the edge of town, a place with creaky floors, drafty windows, and a basement so dark you could barely see your hand in front of your face. The kind of a house where shadows seemed to move even when they shouldn't. People warned us about moving there, said strange things had happened to the previous owners. But we were broke college kids who needed somewhere cheap to live, so we ignored the warnings and moved in anyway. At first, nothing unusual happened. Sure, there were weird noises here and there, the wind rattling the shutters, pipes groaning as water ran through them. But those kinds of sounds are normal in an old house like ours. Or so I told myself. Then came the whispers. I remember the night it began vividly. It was late October, just after midnight. Emily had gone to bed early because she had a big exam the next day. But I stayed up playing video games in our shared living room. That's when I heard it. A faint voice coming from somewhere behind me. Jake. I froze mid-game. At first, I thought it was Emily trying to scare me. Very funny, I called out, without turning around. You almost got me. But there was no response, no laughter, just silence. Curious, I turned my chair around to look at her bedroom door. It was closed, like usual. Shrugging it off, I chalked it up to my imagination and went back to gaming. A few minutes later, though, it happened again. Jake. This time, the voice was louder, clearer, and it definitely wasn't Emily. Her voice has a soft, melodic tone to it. This was different. Hollow, eerie, like it was being whispered directly into my ear from across the room. My heart raced as I stood up and scanned the empty space around me. There was no one there. Nothing but the flickering glow of my TV screen and the eerie stillness of the house. Okay, I muttered under my breath, forcing myself to calm down. Just nerves. Probably just the wind or something. I tried to go back to my game, but the feeling of unease lingered. Every few seconds, I found myself glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone or something standing there. Eventually, I gave up and decided to head to bed. As I walked past Emily's room, I noticed her light was still on. Knocking lightly on the door, I asked, "Hey, Em, you awake?" No answer. Frowning, I pushed the door open slightly. The room was pitch black, except for the faint moonlight streaming through the window. Still, I could make out the shape of her bed, and the fact that it was completely empty. "Emily," I called out again, more loudly this time. Still nothing. Panic began to rise in my chest. Where was she? Had she gone out without telling me? That didn't seem likely. Emily wasn't the type to sneak off in the middle of the night. Besides, her phone was sitting on her nightstand. Deciding to check the rest of the house, I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and began searching room by room. Each step echoed through the silent halls, making me feel increasingly isolated. When I reached the basement door, I hesitated. Something felt off about going down there, but I couldn't ignore the nagging suspicion that maybe, just maybe, she she was waiting for me below. Taking a deep breath, I descended the creaky wooden stairs. The air grew colder with every step, and the smell of damp earth filled my nostrils. By the time I reached the bottom, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the flashlight steady. The basement was cluttered with boxes, tools, and other junk left behind by the previous owners. In the corner stood an ancient filing cabinet, its rusted drawers hanging slightly ajar. As I shone the light around the room, I noticed that something strange written on the wall in red crayon. "She's listening." My blood ran cold. Who wrote that, and what did it mean? Before I could process it further, another whisper cut through the silence. "Jake." This time, the voice was right behind me. I spun around, shining the flashlight wildly, but there was no one there, just the empty expanse of the basement stretching out before me. And then, I saw her, standing in the far corner of the room, partially obscured by the shadows, was Emily. Or at least, I think it was her. Her hair hung limply over her face, hiding her features, and her posture was stiff, unnatural. Even from a distance, I could tell something was wrong. "Emily," I shouted, rushing toward her. "Are you okay? What's going on?" She didn't respond. Instead, she slowly turned her head to look at me. And when she did, I saw her eyes. For the first time since I'd entered the basement, they weren't her eyes anymore. Where once there had been warmth and life, now there was only darkness. Black void staring straight into my soul. My stomach churned as I stumbled backward, tripping over a toolbox and landing hard on the concrete floor. "Em, what happened to you?" I stammered, clutching the flashlight like a lifeline. Her lips parted and she spoke, not with her own voice, but with the same hollow whisper I'd heard earlier. "Jake, no," I shouted, scrambling to my feet. "Stay away from me." But she didn't listen. With each step she took toward me, the air grew heavier, suffocating. The walls seemed to close in around us, trapping me in that cursed room. And then, just as she reached out to grab me, the lights flickered and died, plunging us into complete darkness. When the power came back on moments later, she was gone. That was 3 nights ago. Since then, I haven't seen Emily, or anyone else for that matter. All I have are the echoes of her last words ringing in my ears. "Don't turn around." I don't plan to. Not until I figure out what or who is haunting our house. Because whatever it is, it wants me. And it won't stop until it gets what it wants. Some doors shouldn't be opened. Some whispers shouldn't be answered. After Emily disappeared, I spent hours searching the house, calling her name, checking every corner, every shadowy nook where she might have been hiding. But there was nothing, no sign of her, not even a whisper of her presence, just an oppressive silence that pressed down on me like a physical weight. By morning I was exhausted, my throat raw from shouting her name into the empty air. My mind raced with possibilities. Had someone taken her? Was this some twisted prank by one of her friends? Or worse, had something else dragged her into the shadows? I decided to investigate the basement again, hoping to find answers, or at least clues, that could explain what happened. Armed with a flashlight and a crowbar, just in case, I descended the creaking stairs once more. The red crayon message on the wall, "She's listening," still glared at me, but now it felt different, as though it had shifted slightly since last night. I reached out tentatively to touch it, expecting the surface to feel rough or smeared. Instead, my fingers passed through it as if it weren't really there at all. A shiver ran down my spine. Then I noticed something new, a small, ornate key lying on the floor beneath the writing. It looked ancient, rusted almost beyond recognition, yet strangely familiar. As soon as I picked it up, a chill swept through the room, and the temperature dropped so drastically I could see my breath fogging in front of me. A low hum filled the air, vibrating in my chest. Suddenly, the filing cabinet in the corner drew my attention. Its drawers were wide open now, revealing stacks of yellowed papers inside. One sheet fluttered free and landed at my feet. Picking it up, I saw it was covered in handwriting, notes, diagrams, sketches of symbols I didn't recognize. At the top of the page, written in bold letters, were 2 words: the Whispering Room. My pulse quickened. What did that mean? Was this connected to Emily's disappearance? I flipped through the other pages, finding references to the other side, voices in the dark, and warnings about opening certain doors. Each line sent another wave of dread coursing through me. Before I could fully process any of it, the hum grew louder, almost deafening. The walls began to shake, and the ground trembled beneath my feet. Then, from somewhere deep within the house, I heard it, the sound that would haunt me forever. Her voice. Jake. It wasn't just a whisper this time. It was a scream, distorted and wrong, coming from everywhere and nowhere, all at once. My blood turned to ice as I spun around, trying to pinpoint the source. Shadows writhed along the walls, twisting into shapes that shouldn't exist. They coiled and stretched, reaching for me with skeletal fingers. And then I saw her, or rather, something pretending to be her. Emily stood at the far end of the basement, her figure wavering like heat mirage. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow black pits staring straight through me. She raised a hand, pointing accusingly. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, her voice layered with echoes, each tone colder than the last. "You should have stayed away." "No," I shouted, backing away. "This isn't you. Whatever you are, leave her alone." But instead of retreating, the thing smiled, a grotesque parody of a smile, and took a step forward. Behind it, the air rippled, splitting apart like water to reveal a doorway. Not a normal door, but a swirling vortex of darkness, pulsating with an unnatural light. From within came faint whispers, hundreds of voices murmuring unintelligible phrases, their tones rising in pitch until they became unbearable screams. "I'm sorry, Jake," the creature masquerading as Emily whispered, its form beginning to dissolve into shadow. "But it's too late." Before I could react, the floor gave way beneath me. I fell into darkness, the vortex swallowing me whole. Time seemed to stretch infinitely as I plummeted, surrounded by those endless, maddening whispers. When I finally hit solid ground, I found myself standing in a desolate hallway. The walls were lined with countless doors, each one slightly ajar, leaking faint streams of ghostly light. And from behind them came the sounds, screams, cries, pleas for help, all muffled, distant, yet achingly real. At the end of the hallway stood Emily, or what remained of her. Her body was translucent, her features blurred, her mouth moving silently, as if trying to warn me. Beyond her loomed the same vortex I'd fallen through, only now it pulsed with malice, waiting patiently. And then I heard it, one final whisper, closer than before, right behind me. "Your turn."